All right, let's jump right into today's explainer, where we're going to unlock the secrets of the humble C1815 transistor. It's a tiny little component, but it controls massive currents, and honestly, it's the absolute unsung hero of low-power audio amplification. If you've ever popped open a piece of audio gear or, tinkered around with small signal circuits on your bench, chances are you've already crossed paths with this incredible little device. So today, we're going to break down exactly what makes it tick.
Okay, here's our quick roadmap for the explainer. First, we'll officially meet the C1815. Then, we'll dive into how the transistor actually works, compare its roles as an amplifier versus a switch, look at its core strengths and limitations, and finally, we'll figure out how to find the perfect replacement when things go sideways.
Let's kick things off with Section 1. Meet the C1815, Anatomy of an Unsung Hero.
So you'll often see this guy just marked as C1815 right on the package, but its full proper name is actually the 2SC1815. Essentially, it's a silicon NPN bipolar junction transistor, or BJT. And what it's really built to do is absolutely master low-noise, small-signal audio tasks. It is basically the go-to workhorse for low-power amplification. Engineers meticulously designed this thing for environments where keeping noise to an absolute minimum is critical. Think delicate microphone preamps and things like that.
Now, taking a look at the original Toshiba specs, we can see some pretty interesting boundaries. It handles a solid 50 volts across the collector-emitter junction, which, let's be honest, is surprisingly robust for a small-signal device. But keep in mind, it is strictly a low-power component. It maxes out at a collector current of just 150 milliamps and a total power dissipation of 400 milliwatts. Oh, and it boasts a transition frequency of about 80 megahertz. Basically, think of these parameters as the exact sandbox you're playing in when you drop this component into your circuit. If you happen to have one of these sitting on your bench right now, the standard TO92 package typically uses an emitter-collector-base pinout, reading from left to right. But hey, here is a massive warning. Never, ever blindly assume this orientation without checking your specific manufacturer's datasheet. Depending on the brand or the exact package version you picked up, those pins could be completely shuffled around. And wiring them up backwards? Yeah, that's a one-way ticket to a blown circuit.
Moving right along to Section 2, how the transistor works, the multiplier metaphor.
Okay, so the fundamental job of this C1815 is to control a relatively large collector current using a much, much smaller base current. And the math behind this is actually incredibly simple. Collector current equals gain, which is represented by that little beta symbol, or HFE, multiplied by the base current. To put that into perspective, if you got a current gain of 200, feeding just half a milliamp into that super thin base region is going to yield a massive 100 milliamp collector current. It's this beautiful multiplier effect in pure elegant action. Turning the C1815 on is essentially a progressive 4-step journey. We start at step 1, where it's completely off. It's like an open switch with zero base current. Then, step 2, we apply about 0.6 to 0.7 volts of forward bias to the base of our silicon transistor, and a tiny little current starts trickling in. Step 3 is really where the magic happens. That tiny base current essentially unlocks the floodgates, allowing a huge flow from the collector to the emitter. And finally, step 4. If we supply enough base current, the transistor hits saturation. It is strongly on, and the voltage across the collector and emitter drops all the way down to a mere quarter of a volt. All right, on to Section 3, Amplifier versus Switch, a tale of two functions. You see, this component basically lives a dual life. When it's acting as an amplifier, a really weak audio signal hits the base, producing a varying base current. This creates a beautifully scaled, much larger variation in the collector current, which translates into a strong, robust voltage output. It's smooth, it's accurate, and it's absolutely perfect for low-noise audio preamps. But on the flip side, as a switch, it operates entirely in binary. It just slams hard off when the base is low, meaning zero current, and hard on when the base is high, acting exactly like a digital logic switch. And when it is functioning as that switch, it effortlessly handles things like indicator LEDs, it clicks small relays on and off, triggers buzzers, and interfaces perfectly with digital logic circuits. It's truly the ultimate small load driver.
Which brings us to Section 4, strengths and limitations, knowing the boundaries.
I need you to burn this number into your memory right now. 150 milliamps. That is the absolute maximum collector current rating. And guys, I cannot stress this enough. This is a strict ceiling. It is absolutely not a recommended continuous operating target. If you constantly push the C1815 right up to this edge for extended periods, heat dissipation is going to become a massive problem really fast.
Because of that strict 150 milliamp limit, you have got to avoid using it for power-hungry applications. If you try to switch a large motor, drive high-power illumination LEDs, hook it up to large relays, or build some kind of high-power audio output stage, you are literally going to violently exceed its thermal dissipation limits. Remember, this is firmly 100% a small signal device. But hey, as long as you respect those boundaries, you get some pretty incredible benefits. I mean, first off, it's incredibly cost-effective sitting in that tiny TO92 package. It also boasts a remarkably high 50-volt tolerance, which is fantastic for a small signal transistor. And perhaps most importantly, it features exceptionally low noise characteristics. That's exactly why the original Toshiba documentation specifically highlighted it for audio frequency, general purpose, and driver stage applications. Plus, with highly varied gain grades available, you get fine-tuned control over your precision amplifier circuits. Finally, let's head into Section 5, finding the perfect replacement, passing the torch. Let's face it, components die, they let out the magic smoke, or they just plain go out of stock. So when it's time to replace one, keep this golden rule for workbench repairs in mind. Never, ever select a transistor replacement solely by its name or its HFE. You've got to compare voltage, current, power, gain, frequency, saturation voltage, and the pin configuration. Because, listen, the word equivalent in an online forum definitely does not mean a guaranteed drop-in replacement. If you're only checking the gain or just taking a wild guess based on the name, you are gambling with your circuit. You have absolutely got to check the entire datasheet profile. Now, there are a few common alternatives out there mapped to very specific needs. Say you suddenly need to switch a higher current load. Well, the 2N2222A can handle up to roughly 600 milliamps, making it a stellar heavy-duty switcher, though it does lack the ultra-low noise profile of the original. On the other hand, if you're fixing a mic preamp and desperately need that pure low-noise audio, the BC550 is an excellent choice. And, of course, the 2N3904 and BC527 are really solid, common, general-purpose alternatives, assuming your circuit stays comfortably within their slightly lower voltage ratings. However, if you're looking for the absolute path of least resistance, the KSC1815 is the very first replacement you should investigate for your repair job. It is widely regarded as the closest modern replacement to the original family, perfectly mirroring its performance for small signal and audio applications. Using this one just takes so much of the guesswork right out of the repair. So I'll leave you with this to ponder. The next time you've got a blown transistor sitting on your bench and the music stops, what's your next move? Will you just cross your fingers, buy whatever some guy mentioned in a 10-year-old forum post, and blindly hope the pinout matches? Or will you actually use the analytical tools we just went over, verifying the voltage, the current, the gain, and the pinout, to guarantee a truly successful professional repair? Something to think about. Keep exploring, always double-check those data sheets, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.